I got a very important question to ask you two guys, okay? What do you call an elf who sings?
Snelf.
Okay, I got Snelf. Nothing?
Nothing.
Come on, man. So easy. A rapper.
Oh.
You're listening to Coding Blocks, episode 20. Subscribe to us and leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app.
And visit us at codingblocks.net where you can find show notes, examples, discussion, and more.
And send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments at codingblocks.net and follow us on Twitter at codingblocks or head to www.codingblocks.net and find all our social links at the top of the page. And with that, welcome to Coding Blocks. I'm Alan Underwood.
I'm Joe Zach.
And I'm Michael Outlaw. And let's get into it. It's Christmas time!
And I know we're like a month late getting back into another episode. We can blame Outlaw for all that.
Whoa. With it being Christmas time, JetBrains comes through in a big way. ReSharper 9.
Yes.
Yep. Not as cool as that Doomsday deal they had a couple years ago with like 90% off everything.
Oh,
but
God, that was so awesome.
That
The Mayan
was.
calendar sale.
Oh, yeah, man.
It was like
But
70%
9's good.
off.
Yeah, I think, man, I wish they'd come back with something like that. You know their sales would go through the roof.
Well, I guess depending on what your needs are, though, they do have a new bundle called ReSharper Ultimate. So they've repackaged, or I don't know how you want to say this. They've redone the way the SKUs were. So it used to be you would buy ReSharper for Visual Basic, ReSharper for C#, and you'd buy those individually. Now, no, that's just ReSharper. And they have this ReSharper bundle now where I want to say it was basically for the price of 2 licenses, you're basically getting, I think, 5 or 6. But, and this is why I say it depends on what your need is, because the other part of those products that you're getting were specific to C++. So if you're not doing a lot of C++ development, ReSharper Ultimate might not be for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also noticed they're slipping more and more JavaScript stuff in there, which I guess is a sign of the
You're
times.
loving that these days, aren't you?
No comment.
All right, so what else? Progress Software just acquired Telerik, which I don't know what that means to the software world, but I know there's a lot of users of Telerik tools, especially in the .NET community, so something to be aware of.
You know, we just got through through November. We were talking about all the gaming.
It's game season.
Yeah. Call of Duty?
Oh,
Anyone?
Man, I've been playing the ever-living
It's been
heck out
awesome.
of that. Yeah, that game is amazing.
And you were dogging it before, like, oh, there's just going to be new maps. That's all they are to do is change the maps. It is so awesome.
No, this game is off the chain. It's incredible.
Oh, the boost pack is fantastic. I love just jumping around everywhere.
And actually, I decided that I just wasn't going to get it because I got all the old ones I don't play. But then Patrick Dowling had to go and build a computer and take pictures of it. And then I had to build a computer, and now I got to do something to try it out, right?
But you got to get a big video card.
Yeah, mine's not horrible, but
Well, I don't think Call of Duty requires a big video card.
No, but it doesn't matter if you need it or not.
We're going there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking, somebody else also mentioned Shadows of Mordor being on the console, so I did get it on the PS4. It's amazing.
Well, I was going to ask while we were on Call of Duty before we left that, though, did you finish the campaign? Anyone?
I hadn't even started the campaign. I've not played a minute of the campaign.
Camp what?
All right.
Dude, I accidentally
Sometimes the storylines are fun.
I accidentally figured out how to thrust sideways. I didn't even know you could do it.
Okay.
So, no, I haven't played a second
I'm off
of the
on my
campaign.
own over here.
But no, Shadow of Mordor is absolutely killer. I mean, I know you play it on the PC, right, Joe?
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess there's no point in asking you guys if you're an Atlas or a Sentinel. So, never mind.
Oh, no, I don't even know what you're talking about.
I don't know.
Yeah, clearly.
Wow.
What is it?
All right, Mr. Boost Sideways.
Interesting. Oh, okay, because I guess in the game it actually matters if you play.
It matters. I guess the ending is either green or blue based on your decision, I guess. Is that the deal?
Well, no, that'd be red or blue, and that'd be Halo.
Oh, okay.
No,
Master Chief Collection, come on.
no, I've definitely got some things that should be coming in the mail from Black Friday, so we'll see.
All right.
So yeah, I guess the next thing let's talk about. We've got so it has been a month since we last did our podcast, and
Yeah,
we've
sorry.
gotten a ton of reviews. So this one was just awesome. So I've got to read this one. This was from Holy Moses. Intelligent plus
You think he was
useful.
like, really, Moses? Like, Like Moses came down and parted all the reviews and laid this one down upon us.
I think that's what happened, man. So intelligent plus useful times entertaining equals perfection, which humbling, but I'm a beginner programmer and found this easier to understand and way better than my sleep-inducing college programming class. It's also a nice break from the chaotic, dumbed-down, Ebola pro sports Kardashian world. Keep up the good work. Dudes, you make learning fun and free. Grade A+. So, hey, dude, we really appreciate that. That one actually made me smile. Every time I've read it, I've laughed.
Ebola and Kardashian in the same sentence. That's a win.
Although I'm huge into fantasy football, and it kind of hurt me that you bashed on sports. So
maybe it started out as there were 11 reviews, and he dropped one of the tablets.
Right.
I bring you these 10 reviews.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one was awesome.
Also, Arnie Guj. So he actually mentioned, or she, to see a future episode on software testing and testing methodologies, and that's what we're doing this week. So this one's for you.
Yep.
Yeah, testing. 1, 2, testing. Testing.
Right.
Yeah, very nice. And also, last episode we asked if anyone had any real-world example of the visitor pattern, which we had begun to doubt, and we got 2 responses, Trent Apple and a comment on the website lol. Who both responded with the expression visitor. So we'll have a link to that in the show notes. I can't actually say this is for a fact an example of the visitor pattern because I still don't understand the visitor pattern, but according to Google, this is a great example. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and let's bring in something new here. Let's bring in the mail.app. We get some mail occasionally. You guys write into us, and sometimes we're good about responding to it, and sometimes we might be a little delayed in our response.
Shadows of Mordor.
Yeah, So we got this awesome one from Ray. He writes in and says, stumbled across your podcast recently, and as a longtime developer, found them to be one of the most useful around. You actually discuss real programming issues. Regarding your discussion on episode 17 of use what you know versus something to try something new, and the cost of development platforms reminded me of his own situation. He primarily writes in Visual Studio and .NET, Visual VB or C# using MS SQL, and he wanted to write a simple data tracking application with very object-oriented storage requirements, but he hates mapping objects to relationships, so he wanted to try using an anti-SQL object-oriented database, and he found DB4O. And says it was simple to integrate with Visual Studio. .NET Examples got me up and running within an hour, and it was free. Unfortunately, it looks as if support has been discontinued, but it is still available. But it was a great experience and worth venturing outside his comfort zone. So, he talks about, maybe we should consider doing a podcast on, object language to database storage mismatch, and discuss specific ODBMs and they could be used for everyday applications. So thanks, Ray, for writing in, and we'll put that in the bucket.
Yeah, we've definitely got a long list of things to do, but that's one that I think probably all of us are somewhat interested in. So
yeah, I like Entity, but it's kind of a pain to set up with the code generation and everything. And I know there's a couple.
Pain?
Yeah, it's a pain. If you're doing something little, something exploratory, then using a micro framework like Massive or like Pitapoco or something like that, it's so nice to just say like, you know what? Here's my class. Here's a result from a query, put them together. I'm sure it's using reflection in the background, but I don't care. I'm just having fun.
What the problem is that exploratory stuff always ends up becoming like the legacy work.
Right, yeah.
You end up just building upon that. You're like, you know what, I'll refactor that later. It's small today. It'll be fine.
Version 0.1 becomes 10.0.
Well, I'm not on my couch.
It reminds me of a friend of mine's, the little message he has on Twitter, and it's like it says something like, writing tomorrow's legacy code today.
Right. So much of the stuff I write on my couch ends up never leaving the couch. So I'm not too worried about that.
All right. So we also got another email, and this came from Lewis. And he said, hey, guys, love listening to your podcast. Could you add a list of your recommended tools? I listen while biking, and I remember the vague basics of some tools, like the command line replacement, but I can't remember the actual name. Searching for it is time-consuming. Thanks. So I know we've got a ton of them. I use Con Emulator, which might be what you're talking about. It's Con Emu. I love that one.
Oh, because when he said command line replace, I thought you were talking about like in some of the tips we've talked about, like deleting lines of text or replacing blocks of text.
Yeah,
I
think
misunderstood
he's,
that.
Yeah, I think he's talking about actually command line replacements.
No way, guys. He's talking about biking tools. I've got this fantastic, I forget if it's Park Tools or Alienware or whatever, but it's this great little thing. Fits right into the bike seat and never have a flat.
But yeah, you guys want to just rattle off a list? I know we didn't prepare for this, but I mean,
Well, I don't know. That's going to be helpful.
no, it'll be a little bit, right? Because I mean, it'll all somewhat be in one place.
Get Bash.
Get Bash is good. Notepad,
Chocolatey.
Notepad plus plus.
Just chocolate in. From there, you get all the others.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. But Notepad plus plus. Sublime Text.
Well, Sublime versus Notepad++.
Yeah, I don't feel like we can really list a bunch of tools because there's so many competing tools.
Right.
But
Like
I
you're going to
usually-
say WinDiff, I'm going to say Beyond Compare, and then
Win merge.
oh, yeah. But Sky Henselman's got a big list of tools that he likes, and he kind of does. Maybe we can do something like that on site, just kind of have a running list of things that we
Yeah,
like.
so we'll probably do that. We'll put together a list of tools, and we'll create a blog post, and we'll mention it in the next podcast.
Our 2014 favorite tools.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, there you go, man. You got your wish. We're
All
gonna
right,
figure
thanks.
this one out.
Thanks, Lewis. Now we got a blog to
right.
write.
I think Alan has a blog to like.
Oh God, here we go.
He touched it last.
Yeah,
Also, we got a message from Marcus. This is our last one. So he said he would love to hear a podcast on reactive extensions. And actually, this is something that we've talked about quite a lot and something we're very interested in. But I don't have a lot of experience with it, so I've been kind of hesitant to talk about it. But we do have a local resource here, Jim Woolley, who I would love to talk with more about it. If we can bug him and come on the show on sometime, that would be cool.
yeah. I think we can do that. He sounds like he'd be willing to.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yep.
All right, so do we want to talk about some unit testing?
Yeah. let's do
Please,
this.
I would love to.
All right. Well, I know we're pretty excited to talk about this one because this was near and dear to our hearts.
I actually love talking about testing more than I love testing. And I love testing more than I love coding, so
That's crazy.
I'm a chatty Cathy. So let's start off a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
So, we're talking about a little bit about unit tests, which is a specific kind of test. But really, before we kind of dive into that, I want to talk a little bit about just testing in general. And there's two kind of broad categories, which are really like, testing that you do, like as you're kind of working along in something like manual testing, like you refresh the page or you hit F5 and you run through the application and you see what worked in the debugger if you see what the output looked like. But there's also automated testing. So this is testing that can be run from, say, a command line or some sort of script or something that can be repeated without the involvement of a human. So unit testing definitely falls into that second category. So it is repeatable. But there are lots of repeatable tests. So just kind of throwing it out there, there's security testing, there's performance testing, there's regression testing, meaning did I break something? There's UI testing. If you ever heard of something like Selenium, where it actually acts like a browser. Yeah, it actually kind of mimics like the little mouse moving around, click, 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 submit.
So like when I'm thinking here, when I think testing, I'm thinking more like test-driven development, regression testing, like the functional kind of testing. Oh God, I hate Selenium.
Right. Yeah.
That kind of like I'm not saying it's not important. It totally is, but.
Well, that's one
From a
form of
fragile-
regression. That's one form of regression testing, right?
Yep. So why
but
do you say it's fragile though?
But because so more often than not, like, okay, so I stay away from it because I hate it. But the testing that I have seen done on it, it's very tied to like, okay, well, I need to look for specific classes or div IDs or names of the divs in order to find certain elements on the page. And it's like, oh God, you better hope that nobody ever decides to change that, because sometimes the guy writing that Selenium test is not the guy who's maintaining that page. And when I see it, I'm like, wow, that was a very dangerous, but you got lucky assumption you made there.
Well, one of the problems I've seen, and we don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because we're actually talking about unit tests today, but one of the issues that I've seen with that is you'll see people say, okay, I know that it's the third table on the page, it's the fifth TD down from that. And when you do things like that, you're not testing in a way that makes sense. It's almost like writing code because Selenium is writing code to test your code, right? But when you would never write code that was that rigid, or you would hope you wouldn't, because then as soon as another use case comes along, it breaks.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like any kind of, So I guess another reason why I hate. Okay, so first off, if I wasn't clear already, I love unit testing, but when it comes to like Selenium tests or testing like that, those are follow more the record and replay type strategy of testing,
Yep.
and they're fragile.
Yep. And I'd say they're fragile because they really touch a lot of things. Like, think about all the things that can break a Selenium test. Like, a value in a lookup table could break. You change that column or that row from active to new or something like that. It's going to break. If the HTML changes, it's going to break. If you lose internet connection during the test, it's going to break. If the business logic, or if it's a legitimate bug, or the list goes on and on and on.
But see, here's why it's so important though, because like, and I don't think you said this one though, but one of the type of testing that really isn't under the realm of what I was really thinking we would talk about tonight, but was load testing, performance testing, right? If you wanted to stress test your application, you need something like that can do a full end-to-end if you're really trying to see, hey, does my current architecture meet the needs of what I think, the type of traffic I'm expecting to have, right?
Yep.
Then you need something like this, right? Like Visual Studio has this capability, in Visual Studio Ultimate, where you can record and replay and create a web test, right? So you don't just have to use Selenium. There's plenty of other options out there for this type of testing, but yeah, I haven't seen any of them that I like, that I'm a fan.
One of the best I've seen, I think, is called Quick Test Pro or something like that, but it's a true testing suite. But it's literally like a macro recording, right? Like you go through, you click through, and you record what you do throughout the entire application, and you replay it. Now, if anything ever changes, like you said, a button on the page changes or it disappears or whatever.
What about the workflow?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like record and replay unit, any kind of testing that is based on record and replay is fragile by its nature.
Yep.
So in the case of like a Selenium, if you decide to, hey, I want to test the checkout flow, but let's add in a new page.
You got to redo it all.
Yeah, you got to redo the whole test. So I don't know.
But it kind of
maybe
makes
somebody
sense,
will
right?
speak in that's like an expert in Selenium or web testing, platforms, and they can write in and speak to their experience. But I to date haven't been a fan.
But I will say, even though you're not a fan, it's still one of those necessary evils type things. Because,
it's definitely evil.
Because the thing is let's say that you're working on bug fixes on other portions and you did not change the workflow. In theory, your testing should succeed now, and if it doesn't, then that means you probably put in a new regression.
Right, and that's why I conceded that it is needed.
Yeah.
But so in the other testing that we're, the regular kind of testing that I'm thinking of, that we're going to be talking more about, like that kind of unit testing, I like more, and it just seems, it doesn't seem to have the same fragileness.
Yeah. And I would also say that it goes for a different type of problem. Like when I'm doing unit testing, then I'm frequently working with some sort of runner and I'm running the test often, but I'm not doing that with Selenium. The tests take a long time to run. So it's not like you're going to make a little change and then run through all your Selenium tests again.
Oh, well, we should just say that.
It takes forever.
But so you said that Selenium is slow, but really, and to be in complete fairness, if we talk about, when we say that Selenium is slow, we're really just referring to that type of unit test.
Right.
Or
It's
or
not
that
Selenium.
kind of test.
Nothing in Selenium.
Yeah. But really, if I could sum that up even better, though, what's slow are integration tests, period. And you could write integration tests in like in a test-driven development kind of environment, right? If you needed to actually make connections to a database and you needed to do real types of, if you had dependencies on like real file systems or anything like that, anytime you do an integration test, I don't care what kind it is, you introduce latency into your test.
Absolutely. And really, like the first time anyone hears about unit testing or test-driven development or any of those buzzwords, the first thing they might do is sit down and write an integration test and think they're unit testing. And that's because that's kind of what comes to mind. That's what you think about when you hear the word testing. It's like you think about scripting out some sort of change that does something important in your system.
Well, I feel like I kind of derailed this because we were going to start about talking about the types of testing, and I've already started talking about the things I hate.
So actually though, but
I guess,
think,
this is Festivus, so Greg, get around the Festivus poll and let me tell you what things that I hate.
but I think this is a good opportunity though to actually define and nail down what is a unit test exactly, because we just talked about Selenium, which is like UI testing workflows and all that kind of stuff, and then you have your functional integration tests, which we just kind of said are involving your databases, your business logic, all that kind of stuff. So tell us, break it down. What exactly is a unit test?
Okay, so in my own words, like, if I were talking about the kind of unit testing that I like, let's say that you have a simple method that you pass in some variables, you expect a certain result. In my mind, when I talk about unit tests and when I talk about how I love unit tests, I'm talking about a unit test or a suite of test cases that will take different inputs into that method and test for different outputs or different scenarios. Like maybe if you expect exceptions to be thrown under certain scenarios, things like that, or if you want to make sure that it can error handle correctly, that's the type of test that I'm referring to when I say that I love unit testing.
So what's your take on that?
Yeah, basically the take I'm taking is the one I stole from Wikipedia, which is basically they give an intuitive definition here saying that one can view a unit as a small testable part of an application. So when I think of a unit test, I think of it literally testing a line or a very small piece of functionality even within a method. So if you've got small methods, that can be at the method level, but it's usually something that's very kind of small, and you add these little very small things together, and it kind of paints the whole picture.
So to give an example to what I was saying, let's say that I had some method called add, and it takes in 2 integers and returns back an integer, right? A simple test method might be to pass in, 2 and 3, and test for the result of 5 coming back, right? That's the type of test that I'm talking about when I talk about that I love unit tests.
Okay, so let's take this to another level. When you talk about that, you expect an integer 2 and 3 to go in. What if somebody passes a null? Are you going to be testing for exceptions at that point?
Right. So those are the other use cases that I was referring to when I said that there might be a suite of tests that you have against that same method, right? That you're testing for, like, okay, what happens if you pass in a string? What happens if you pass in a null? Does it error handle it correctly? Or in the case of maybe you want to have an exception thrown under certain scenarios, did it throw the proper exception? Things like that.
And to be clear here, so what we're talking about, just so you know, we have one method here, add, right? And we're saying that you might have 10 unit tests that you write against it. One that's actually passing in valid inputs, one that's passing in inputs that you may not expect, another one that's just maybe not even passing in the inputs, whatever. So you would write a unit test for this method 5, 6, 7 different ways so that you can identify that it's working the way you expect it to work.
Yeah, that's yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. And so you are definitely testing a very small piece of the system. And I think a lot of people get frustrated when they try to do something like that because they don't think there's a lot of value. They can look at this small method, add, and say, obviously it works, and who cares? Let's move on.
But see, the beauty of it, though, is that, like, going back to your point of regression earlier, though, is that you test these small little pieces like that, and now it's almost like you have a contract that, hey, at this point in time, at one point, this piece of code passed all of these scenarios. And if you've done anything to make any one of these scenarios fail, it's on you. You've done something.
Well, and you need to worry about it at that point,
Right,
because that means somewhere in your application things are potentially going to go sideways.
Right, because you've now changed the contract. It doesn't adhere to all of these scenarios that it used to adhere to.
Right. But I would say here's the argument is, and this is not not a good argument, but I would say that a lot of people would argue that why not just test the method that calls that add, or test at a higher level of abstraction and test like a workflow that ends up calling all these methods underneath, right? Aren't I testing all this stuff in a realistic way and the system's going to actually use it? And isn't that good enough?
That's an interesting point to make about it.
Yeah, but there's problems with like you're testing the happy path, right? You can't possibly check all those little things.
Well, what I was thinking is that you get too many dependencies.
Yeah, and that's definitely a problem as well. And when you start talking about the dependencies, things start getting fragile and they also start getting slow. So if you're testing like a whole checkout workflow or something, you're probably looking at minutes to run through all of that.
This might be why I don't like the testing platforms like the Seleniums of the world, because there are too many dependencies in there. Where like I like to be able to test that endpoint, like in the add method that we were talking about. That seems like that's a method that's not going to call another method, right? So it makes it simple. Once you start getting into these other paths that you were describing, where you have methods calling methods and classes and classes, right? It gets deeper and it becomes the possibility for your test failing at a future date become higher.
But
right?
you know what, though? That's why you need a combination of the two. You need the unit test, you need the functional integration test, and you need the Selenium test, right? Like, I mean,
Yep.
Well,
this
I was
is
actually going to change that and say that's where you would use mock.
Well, I would say that you just described the testing pyramid. Hey, so there's this notion by this guy
I didn't
called
realize I was setting you up.
Mike Kahn. We'll have a link to him in the show notes. Who described this testing pyramid, which refers to a triangle with GUI tests, your user interface test being the very tip of that triangle, your acceptance or integration or functional tests being like the middle, and your unit test making up the by far the largest portion of these tests. And that's because they are very fine-grained. When something breaks, you know exactly what line it broke on, and they shouldn't break that often, and you get fast feedback cycles when you actually work on it. So it's really useful as a tool for your development. And that's the way that I think of testing is it's really a tool to help me code, not so much prevent bugs, which is weird because when you think of testing, that's what you think about, right?
Yeah, I mean, to add on to your comment, though, it kind of is a great segue into like a test-driven development type of pattern, but I, for the life of me, can't do it.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of debate about it.
I read the books on it, and I'm in awe of the people who do it, where they write their test first. But honestly, there's more often than not, I don't even know what my class is going to look like yet. I don't even know what it's going to be named.
right.
I don't even know what the methods are going to be named. Like, and now I got to write that test. And so I know that the approach is, you write the test, you write some code, you refactor, rinse and repeat, right? Refactor. But since I don't even yet know what my class is going to be named, what methods are going to be named, like things like that, sometimes I would be doing a lot of refactoring. And I'm very particular about the structure of my unit tests, which I was really planning on getting into this later, but the structure of my unit tests matching the actual tests that I'm, the methods that are under test. So I would end up going nuts having to refactor that all the time.
Yeah, and that's kind of funny about unit testing and testing in general is like if you're talking about a brownfield app, most of the time it's impossible to test it because there's so many dependencies. You really can't cut stuff out easily. But then at the same time, it's really hard to unit test a greenfield project because you don't really know what you're doing and you're frequently deleting whole classes and changing things around dramatically. So you end up wasting a lot of time.
That's why I would love to get better at TDD, but you gotta change your mindset.
Completely. And you also have to plan a lot more up front if you don't want to spend a lot of time refactoring, redoing, which is hard, especially if you're working on a personal project, right? Like you don't really want to sink that much time into it. You want to sit down and do something and get where you're going. And I don't know, that's one of the things with test-driven development that I've found difficult is unless you have a well laid out plan, it's hard to go down that path.
Yep, absolutely. Especially if it's a personal project and you don't even know if you're going to be working on this tomorrow, if you're going to give up. If you're just trying to get something working, then it's hard to test. But I do think that if you write a lot of tests, whether it's brown or green, or you just kind of force yourself to do it, then after a while your code starts reflecting that style, and so you end up doing things like keeping dependencies out and stuff kind of naturally. And although it's definitely easy to slip stuff in there and not realize till you actually try to test it, it keeps you honest. It can be a good practice.
Well, that is the beauty of test-driven development, though, is that it does force you into this path where it tries to keep you more honest, which is a good thing, right? Because I've definitely found myself in situations where, like, after the fact, I go to test something, and I'm like, oh, crap. I made a dependency in there that I didn't mean to make.
Yep.
So,
And you'll see people talk about it being a design tool, and so it's weird with the name testing. It's kind of a misnomer, but at least that's my opinion on it. So yeah,
Yeah. So why test?
well, I would say that the obvious answer is that kind of springs to mind is fewer errors. But actually, I don't have a link to this. I need to find one. But in the book Code Complete, which is I don't know, written in the 80s and has been updated, but it's still an awesome, fantastic book. But they actually did a lot of studies on different kind of testing methodologies and, basically comparing them, like how does code review do against automated testing versus, like static analysis. And they did find that unit testing was not near the top. I think it found like 30% of errors, and code review did much better. But when you combine these multiple tactics together, that's when you got by far the best results. And so it does, reduce bugs, but not as much as you might think. The good news there is that I would say that you probably find bugs sooner. And I don't know if there's been any studies to determine that or not, but it's nice to know, like, if someone makes a line of code change and runs the tests, or else maybe some sort of build server runs that test after they check in, then hopefully they're going to find that error the second it happens and not 3 months later after you've got a bunch of data to fix.
Well, before you go on to the next portion of this, I think that's one of the things that you guys were talking about just a minute ago with it forces you to be consistent in the way that you code and also the way you think about things, because in a lot of cases you'll see people write code and it won't check for nulls or it won't check for things. When you start writing unit tests, you have to think about these things because you're going to be thinking about, all right, what happens when I give it this input? What happens if I give it a null input? Does it send me back a null output? Whatever. And so when you start thinking about that, you kind of get in the mindset of you have this set of things that you're going to be trying. And so it almost forces you to be more complete in just your approach to writing code at that point. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I've also seen the remark that sometimes people say that tests are the documentation. I've never gotten this one. I've never gone to the test to be like, how should this work? And I feel like that's the case maybe with integration tests, but unit tests?
Well, this is where I was going to say, like, to your comment a moment ago, though, about the about catching the errors and everything, is that, yeah, it can catch errors sooner in, like, your low-level API calls, like the add method that I mentioned, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't use that method wrong, right? So maybe in your UI, you could still have a bug in your UI where you're you called add when you should have called a multiply method. Right. But the add method is still working. So yeah, it's not going to catch your usage of that method wrong. Right. But that's where, other platforms might come in, play better.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Also, we kind of mentioned it promotes loose coupling, good design. And we kind of mentioned, catching bugs automatically. So like automatic regression catching, which is really nice. But really the three biggies that I think are really important is, as we mentioned, it promotes, I just mentioned this, well-crafted code. Also, my favorite, a shorter feedback loop. If you've ever done something where you had to just add some little line of code, but then you have to spin up the application, kind of click 3 ways, set up your data, this way and that way, in order just to see if something, stupid worked, like changing a plus to a minus, then you can do that in a little test, be reasonably certain that it's going to work like you think it's going to work, and then go, verify it when you need to. So it's a way of kind of working.
More importantly than that, though, you can run it through a multitude of scenarios much faster in your unit test than you could by spinning up the application as you described, right?
And clicking through the UI 20 different ways.
Yeah. Whatever that interface might be.
Yep. So if you got some little code that kind of like converts a hash map to an array or something like that, it's something kind of trivial. You wouldn't really think about it, but now I don't have to go click the application to do it. I can see that my conversion's happening like I expect.
And this might be the whole reason why I like the API type unit testing versus the Selenium, is just because it is easier and faster to see it, without having the dependencies in there.
But your dislike of that, though, it makes sense, but it's still necessary. Like it's testing something totally different, right?
It
like
is.
You're
What
testing what the
like,
end user's going to see, as opposed to what you as the developer expect to happen, right? And that's really the big difference.
The place where I see these happening, though, these happen. Okay, so this is kind of in line with Joe's comment about shorter feedback loop, because the place that the unit test is ran should be at the developer's workstation,
Yes.
right? Whereas I would imagine that like load testing, performance testing, those are handled out closer to the edge, right? That's happening as part of before you deploy it, something like that. A Selenium might be before that, before you like send it off for user testing. You run it through some automated testers to catch some of the quick ones. So there's different testing
layers
types that are happening at different stages of the development cycle.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, and if you think like the opposite of a short feedback loop, like a long feedback loop, like if you're working for a cash register company, something, and or an ATM machine, you need to make sure that if they type in 5 digits that it displays an error message, then you shouldn't have to make the code change, upload the code to the ATM, go over to the ATM, try 5 digits to see if it worked, and it doesn't, you go back. Especially when something's multiple steps in, like that's a long time just to test this little change. So if you can kind of make this little change, see that's working, kind of move on to something else that's somewhat related, and then go kind of verify it in the user interface later on, then you've saved a lot of time.
I know I don't want to use your ATM.
Well, it kind of depends on which error direction it went in.
And I'm really surprised to see, or maybe not surprised, but I know there's been a big rise in unit testing in JavaScript lately with like tools like Jasmine. And I know for me, when I used to write a lot of JavaScript, I would do stuff like, no comment. So you would do something like, write a line you're not sure if it's going to work, so you write an alert or a console, or write the debugger statement, and you see it, and you're like, okay, that's not what I thought. Let me go back, repeat, click, 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 click. All right.
I thought
so
the
now
alert
I got the next
method was
alert.
for testing JavaScript.
That's right. It's definitely
That's not how unit testing is done in JavaScript.
And that's never been left in production code anywhere.
Oh man. You should leave your console open just to see the stuff that's in there.
But yeah, the JavaScript testing frameworks have definitely grown in popularity over the past year or two.
Yep. And I got 2 quotes here from David Starr, and these are from the Pluralsight video, which we'll have a link to. And one of the quotes is that writing tests first means writing testable code, and the other is that writing testable code happens to result in well-designed code. So those things we just talked about, but just, before we moved on, I wanted to mention, like, what do we mean by well-designed code? Because, it all works, right? Isn't the real value in just getting the right answer? But I think what he would say here is to say that well-designed code means that your code is easy to read, not necessarily easiest, right? Because we got interfaces. We've got code that's easy to maintain and easy to change.
Because it's solid?
Because of solid, because of cutting those dependencies that you're gonna end up doing some interfacing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's take a moment to make a shout out here. So we got some love on iTunes here. Amy Meyer wrote in, and she says, "A great podcast to improve your coding. Focused, to the point, real developers talking about real issues and decisions we all make."
Wait, decisions or mistakes?
Maybe a little both.
I think maybe she was giving us some credit.
But
I guess my mistakes are decisions, right? So
it can be.
superset.
We also got one on Stitcher, which that one's usually a little bit quieter, but from Adam UK, awesome podcast for devs. I think regardless of your experience, you're going to learn something new from these guys.
Where do you think he's from?
No idea. Adam Uck, not sure.
Yeah, it's a weird name.
But as always, guys, we really do appreciate the feedback. And if you are enjoying the podcast, you're learning anything, please do take the time to go to iTunes, Stitcher, and come up to our site and leave us a comment or something. We really do appreciate it. So,
and not only that, like Alan said, if you are enjoying it, do us the favor and tell 2 friends that about the show and get them hooked on it as well. And if you don't enjoy the show, tell 3 friends. Or 3 people that you don't like. Yeah. Get them hooked on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yep. All right, so how do you test?
Yeah, that's one thing. There's plenty of tutorials, so you can definitely go Google it and see. That's how we're not going to read code over the air to you. But did want to mention what it really means to actually write a test. And for the most part, at least for me, it means starting up a new assembly that just contains tests. I don't want to mix my test code in with my normal stuff. And
you don't want to mix your chocolate with your peanut butter?
That's right. Not in this case. I don't want to be deploying any sort of test code that could accidentally get run or do something weird in production. So definitely like to keep that separated. And then use some sort of test runner. And MS Test comes bundled with certain visual versions of Visual Studio.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I think it's a Pro, right?
Well, they did just come out with the new
Community.
version, though, and I believe that one includes MS Test, doesn't it?
Oh, nice. I don't
I
know.
might be wrong on that.
Yeah, and also another popular one in .NET is NUnit. And what's nice about those is they both have standalone runners, so you can run them from command line. And NUnit actually has like a UI you can run, which is nice. And NUnit is
Nobody
really
uses
popular.
that.
I used to use it. I like it.
Yeah,
It's a bright green, though.
Maybe
It's a
when it
bright
first
green.
came out, you used it. I mean, yeah, so did
Well, now I got
but
ReSharper.
now who
Well,
bothers?
yeah, I mean, I know we're talking about these things, but for those who don't use them, I mean, what are they looking to expect from this, right?
Oh, sure. And Test Runner basically loads up some sort of config file, or else it like scours your assembly and figures out what public tests to run, and it goes through, it iterates through, and runs each test and tells you which one fails.
Well, more often than not, depending on the test runner, they'll have different decoration. It's looking for methods and classes decorated with different attributes.
So I say this is like I tag it as a test class or a test method.
Yeah, and if everything succeeds, then you'll basically get a bunch of greens, right? If something fails in there, it'll stop and let you know. Or in some of them, it stops, and others it'll continue running, but it'll point out which one of those unit tests failed.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I mean, it shouldn't stop running the test just because one of them failed. But what I really wanted to point out here, though, because there were some other ones, like XUnit and MSpec that maybe you need to use for your specific. Definitely NUnit is among the top, and MS Test is definitely up there because it's bundled in. More often than not, you're going to be using a version of Visual Studio that has it built into it. But we should point out that NUnit is, of course, a variation of JUnit, which was the Java version, and there's some slight differences between the two. NUnit definitely started from off of the shoulders of JUnit, but they definitely ended up taking different paths. So there are some subtle differences between them as they've both matured. But what I really wanted to mention with this part, though, was that don't use MS Test. Yeah, because there's a lot of things that you would want to do, that you might want to do, that in the beginning of your unit testing career, you might find that you don't even think about. You're like, well, that's not a big deal. I don't care, and so you just use MS Test. But eventually, you'll kind of grow up into that career, and there'll be certain things that MS Test will just fall completely short on. And like the biggest one that comes to mind for me that I often want to do that it can't do easily or well with MS Test is parameterized test.
Absolutely.
And by that, what I mean is, like, let's picture you had that add method, right? And let's say that I have another class and another assembly, as Joe mentioned, and in that assembly and in that class, there's a method to test that add method. And, maybe I want to have one version of it that tests 2 and 3, and another version that'll test 3 and 4, another version that'll test 4 and 5. Well, it'd be nice if I could only have one test and then just pass in those values as parameters to that test, and then just test each one of those to see that they return back the expected result, right? Now, in that very contrived example, that might not seem of value, but you'll see that there might be tests in the future where, let's say you want to do address validation, comes to mind, right? Any kind of string manipulation where you might want to just pass in different variations of a string and check to see, like, hey, did my regular expression still match under this scenario? What about under this scenario? What about if I'm looking for a PO box in this format, a PO box in that format? What about, so that's where parameterized tests are awesome.
Yeah,
Yep.
because if you come up with a new variation on that in the future, you can just add another.
And all
List
it
of
is
parameters.
it's you have the one method, okay? So you're staying very dry, but you have multiple attributes on top of that method, each with the different parameters, right? And there might be some subtle differences between like an NUnit versus a JUnit, but yeah, parameterized tests all the way. In MS Test, there's no good way to do it.
Yeah, there's something with an XML file, but no one does that.
I mean, I've seen some other complete hacks out there where they're like creating data tables on the fly and passing in the values that way, and then passing the data table off to the method, and then gross.
That's just fragile too. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want to be spending my whole time messing around with that. I just want to get to it.
Well, yeah. I mean, as far as your comment about fragile, though, you can just as easily write bad unit test code as you can regular code. So
Absolutely.
you do have to be careful about the way you structure some of this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that comes to mind is, and we talked about this, is you could, if you have 100 different things that are testing a class per se, and you were newing up that class in every one of your 100 test methods, that's not a dry approach. And now if that class changes, the implementation of that class changes, and you can no longer instantiate it the way that it was being done 100 times before, you now have to go touch every one of those test methods to update how it instantiates that class.
Oh, you mean like if you change the constructor or something?
Yes. So
Object initializer.
So one of the
Yeah,
getting away
constructors,
from
man, that's not very dry.
Man, who does that anymore?
getting away from that. So what you should do is it's very easy for people writing unit tests to just kind of almost copy and paste their code into a new unit test, and that's a bad idea too, because then you are doing bad practices. Keep it dry. If you're going to be newing up a class somewhere, put that in its own call somewhere, and then that way if that ever changes, you only have to change it in one place. So even your unit tests need to be coded well, because it can come back to bite you in the butt later if you don't think about these things up front.
Well, I will mention, though, we said before when we were talking about the Seleniums of the world, and we categorized those as the simple record and replay type test scenarios. There are there are older frameworks that did similar things at the API levels that really kind of fallen out of usage, out of favor nowadays. But the pattern of testing that has become more widely acceptable would be the AAA format, the arrange, the act, the assert pattern for your test. So when you're constructing your test, you have one portion of it where you arrange variables to match whatever scenario you're testing. You have an act portion of the method that is going to actually test the method. It's actually going to call the method under test, right? And then there's the assert portion that'll be last, and that's going to check to whatever the return value was, for example, or if you're checking to see if a certain method got called. Whatever it is that you're trying to test for, that assert is going to happen last. And the best practice would be that you should only have the one assert method, or the one assertion in your unit test.
Yeah, and I feel like if you're having a problem following this pattern of the AAA, then maybe you're doing something a little fishy there. And it's a good pattern for different reasons. Like, you don't want to have more than one assert, because if one of them breaks, you don't know about the rest of them. It's not as informative, and it kind of hides stuff from you.
All right, so
One other thing, since we're already talking about things to watch out for, I got a dog on it. I'm sorry. Singletons. A lot of times,
Oh my God!
there's one in the application. They often.
doing it. Why would you do this to me, Joe?
I'm sorry.
We were friends.
Couldn't do it. The singletons often they hide dependencies. So you might have a singleton class that does stuff like interact with session or the database or the file system, like a logging application, or all the different examples we gave of reasons to use singletons are all really bad for unit testing.
Now
'Cause
hold on. Before you go dogging my boy Singleton, now is this because the singleton itself is a bad pattern, or because the specific implementation maybe should have used some dependency injection? Maybe
dependency injecting a singleton.
Whatever the dependencies that you're talking about that the singleton has.
Right. Well, so yeah, we talked a little bit about singletons and how you kind of instantiate them, and if you're kind of passing those in, like I think actually the definition of a singleton might be that it creates itself, right?
Yeah, it does. But what I'm saying though is, like, you're talking about that the singleton itself has like a dependency on, I don't know, like a database or maybe the file system. And what I'm saying is, if that singleton has a dependency on something else, right? what if you were using like a dependency injection to solve that? Then is it still the fault of the singleton pattern in regards to testability?
Right. So
Before you get dogging on my boy now.
it's true. So singletons, I will say,
I got your
singletons
back, singleton.
often hide
life.
dependencies, but that's not a requirement of the singleton. It's just how everyone uses them.
Yeah, it is often used bad. I will admit.
Yeah. So if you see a singleton in code, you're probably going to have a testing tough spot.
In fairness, that's not bad use. It's just not loose coupling of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well, this often goes back to like when we were talking about the creational patterns. Shoot, what episode was that? I
who
forget.
knows.
But and we talked about the singleton and the that particular pattern. There's at least a dozen different ways to construct a singleton.
Yeah.
Right. And my favorite particular one of them had to do with where you have a like if we're talking strictly in C#, where you would have like an instance property, right? And whenever you call that property, if that value is null, based off of some member backing data, then it can instantiate a new version of itself, and then that's what it would return back for you to use. But you allow it to be reset. So if you wanted to be able to maybe you want to have a specific method to do the resetting, or maybe you want to be able to just pass in like a null value to it, or whatever your preference might be. The point is, like, one of the singleton patterns was like static constructor. Hate that version of the singleton implementation, because in the examples that you mentioned, where if you do have a dependency on something like a database or a file system, whatever that might be, if that static constructor based singleton fails, then it will never reinstantiate it, and you can never do anything about it. So at least in that the instance property version that I mentioned, in your testing scenario, you at least have the ability to reset that value back to null. So at the arrange portion of your test case, you could say singleton.instance equals null, and that way you're guaranteed that the next time when you call that, it's going to be a fresh version of it. So it'll reset itself for your test, which is something we didn't really discuss. But each version of each one of your tests needs to be a fresh state.
Right, and that's a really good point. And so we've got a little section here we called "How do I know if I'm doing it right?" And actually, one of the
When
items,
it hurts.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. But one of the items on there that I'm adding right now is basically, can your items run out of order? And then that's really important. I don't think I've ever seen a test runner that lets you order your tests specifically.
Oh, that's actually a pretty big one though too, because when you write your unit test, there is no guarantee depending on what tests are going to run in what order. And depending on the test runner, I've actually seen you will see different results. You'll see different tests get called.
I think they do it on purpose.
In different order.
Yep.
Well, I'm pretty sure like I don't remember now. One of them specifically if you were to run MS test versus in unit, one of them actually I've noticed, and maybe this was just my luck, but I happen to notice that it was running all the tests bottom up.
And
It's
I
like
believe
whatever
I've
the
seen-
class was, it was running the test bottom up.
I feel like that's a feature that they do that to kind of keep you honest. It makes sense that you don't want to rely on some sort of state, because we're supposed to be cutting out our dependencies here and testing our actual code lines. So we shouldn't be relying on some sort of shared state between these methods. So I think it makes sense to run these tests out of order, just to make sure that calling method A before B doesn't do anything in the stateless test.
Yeah, and if you actually have a test that depends on the outcome of another test, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. And you're writing integration tests.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's an integration test at that
Yep.
point. So
Well, I don't even know if you could call it that, because then if I switch the test runner, it's going to fail.
no, but what you said is if you're writing them that depend on the outcome, the output
But I said
of
if
something
you're writing
else.
a test that depends on the outcome of another test.
Right. That's. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right.
I'm with you.
Right, and it's also really bad too, because if you think like, say I have test 1 that moves the file, test 2 deletes the file from its new location, what happens if test 2 fails? And then I've got this file sitting there, it's going to mess up future runs of the test, and it's just getting my system into a bad state.
Yep.
Yep. Also, another reason or another way to tell if you're doing it right is whether you could run your tests on your build server if you have one. And what that kind of tells you is that the build server usually doesn't have access to things like the production servers or production database, at least hopefully not. things like Session, IIS, stuff like that. It's just a dumb build server. So if you can run your tests on your build server, then you're probably doing okay.
So let's back up for a moment here, because we kind of skipped ahead. But let's say, like, why should we test first?
Why should you test first?
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree that you should. It
No?
kind of depends. So there's a big argument right now kind of going on between like Martin Fowler and the DHH Ruby guy we can find a link to. And they're kind of talking about the value of TDD. They're not talking about the value of testing, and they're not arguing that. Both of them kind of agree on that. But they are talking about the value of writing the test first. And the problem is, as we kind of mentioned, brownfield code, existing legacy code bases, it's really hard to abstract stuff out. And when you're doing greenfield stuff, a lot of times you're focusing on the UI and kind of just seeing and prototyping and seeing if something's going to work. So it can be difficult to test first. And so, the idea I think that DHH is kind of proposing, I'm surely getting this all wrong, but what I'd like to think that he's going after is that you don't have to write your tests first as long as you're writing testable code. And TDD is a tool for writing testable code, but it's not the only way.
Thank God.
Yeah. And there's this whole notion of, they call it red-green refactor, where you write the failing test first, and you basically write the code with the test code with no code to test, make sure it fails, and you make sure it passes by doing green, and then you kind of do you sort of a little cleanup and make sure that it's still green, and you just iterate on that. But it's slow. It's very slow.
I will say the closest I've been able to personally get into like TDD, which isn't, I don't think, according to everything I've ever read about it, that would be considered true TDD, is if I'm already pretty far along in my class, or classes, I should say, whatever that namespace is that I might be working in, and I already have pretty much established the pattern of where it's going to end up, then I can start writing tests that, I know I'm going to want this test, and I know I'm going to want that test, and I can go ahead and have them fail. But where I say, like, I'm still fall short on the true TDD is, like, often I'll know that I want to test something, but I'll go ahead, I won't know exactly how the innards of that test are going to look, so I'll just write an assert fail, or assert is true false.
Yeah, I don't like that
type of method. But I know you say you don't
You're
like that.
stubbing
But
it out, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I'm stubbing out the test, and I don't commit it like that, but I go ahead and write that structure. That way I know, like, hey, at some point I want to write a test, or I want to come back and finish this test to pass this, but it's not true TDD. I still can't get into that.
Yeah, it's gross.
As much as I try and want to.
Another big problem I have with TDD, and you'll see this a lot, is a lot of times you'll say write the minimum amount of code to make the test pass. And what that means is, like, if you're testing, you've got a length function, you want to return the value 1 if there's only one item in the list, and that very first test you write, you call it, has 1, and then you go, make it fail, then you go over to your code, you return the value 1, because you're literally writing the least amount of code to make the test pass, not correctness. Then you come back to your test. Does it equal 1? Yes, it does. And you add your second test, and that's when you go and end up kind of fixing your first case. But that just seems really gross and backwards to me, and I just haven't been able to swallow that.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see, like, where is this going to end up in the long, like 10, 15, 20 years from now, are we going to still, like, is TDD going to be the winner, or are we going to come back on it and be like, you know what? No. Maybe some other pattern will become the main one. Who knows?
Honestly, I think it probably boils down to the type of application, right? Like, if it's something that is critically financial or transactionally related,
Yeah, sure.
then maybe you do something like TDD, because it makes a lot of sense, right? It might be slower, but your whole goal is to make sure it's perfect, right? So I would almost think that it might differ across industry or across application type.
And even work type. Like, if you're trying to fix a bug, like, you can't add a negative quantity to a cart. It makes sense. So you could, and the bug exists. You could write a test that's, adds the item to the cart and doesn't work. Yes, then I go fix it and then fix the test.
Right.
So what happens if you write that code, the least amount of code to solve that test or pass that test, as you said? And so in your example, you were testing for 1. You write a method that just hard codes to return back 1. then you go to lunch and you
And
forget.
then you forget. Yeah, and I think that's what his point was.
Yeah, and
Then
the
you
code
get this-
coverage shows 100% because every
Yeah.
line is
You're like,
tested.
That's like the Sopranos of code. Forget about it.
Yeah,
I'm good.
right.
Yeah. So how do you test? How do you TDD brownfield stuff then? Existing code.
Yeah,
Well, you
usually
can't.
don't. Yeah.
It's already written. The code's already written. It's brown.
Yeah.
There you
So
go.
it's basically from then on, it's kind of the Boy Scout rule. You basically just try to make things a little bit better, and any sort of new code you write, you try to do it in a dependency-less style. Keep it solid, and then it's testable.
But I mean, almost going back to your point, you almost can TDD portions of your code at a time.
Only
So-
if you're like introducing new features.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
brownfield doesn't mean that you're not ever enhancing it or anything, right? It just means that it's an existing code base. So to your point a minute ago, hey, if there's one portion that you really strongly feel that needs to be driven by a certain set of rules, then maybe you do that portion that way. So I don't know, just an interesting thought on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, and so here was something interesting I found on Stack Overflow. And this, we'll leave a link in the show notes, but there was this thing that this guy wrote, and I don't remember who it was, but he had these two notions, and I'm sure they weren't his, but equivalence partitioning and boundary value analysis. These were two different approaches to unit testing that I thought were pretty interesting. So really what it boils down to is, instead of trying to test for every single input and output that exists, so equivalence partitioning is you break your inputs into groups. So let's say that, I don't know, maybe you have negative numbers, zeros, and positive numbers. That's your groups. And then given those, you have an output expectation based off those inputs. So that logically groups your inputs and your expected outputs. And that's why they call it like this equivalence partitioning, because they all should, given the input, give you an equivalent type output.
Clearly, this guy uses NUnit.
And to me, they're kind of like to kind of dumb it down so I can understand it. It's basically a way of dividing your data set into these kind of regions that you think make sense. So you like if you've got something that makes change for $1, you could test every single combination of the coins, and it's going to be miserable. Or you can write a couple tests. You basically subdivide your data and say, big amounts, small amounts, negative amounts, something like that. That's probably a bad example, but it's just the idea of kind of taking up the full range of expected inputs and kind of dividing it so that you're testing a representative from each group.
Well, am I thinking about this wrong? Because when I made my joke, I was thinking of parameterized test.
Well, I would do parameter tests with it, so I would do like
That's kind of
tests
what
for
this is.
negative, tests
Yeah.
for positive, tests for big, tests for small, whatever.
You're just talking about having the parameters grouped together.
Yes. Yeah. And then the boundary value analysis was actually taking that equivalence partitioning, which we just talked about, like one step further and saying, hey, all these edge cases themselves also need their own test. So if I mean, I can't come up with a great example off the top of my head, but let's say that, you were taking in US dollars, but then somebody passed in pesos, right? You might have a pesos type test. So it's basically expanding upon the grouping and saying, hey, these outliers, the ones that you expect, these edge cases that may occur, you might want to have unit tests for those individually. So that was a pretty interesting take.
Yep. So
So let's talk about why testing sucks.
Yeah.
it really does.
If we haven't convinced you already.
Yeah.
Well, first off, it's trying to tell me I didn't do it right the first time,
Right.
which we all know is wrong. I did it right.
And
I'm not wrong.
There's a reason why, 7/8 of the places you've probably worked in your life haven't had 0 tests. It's because it's hard and it requires a lot of refactoring, and a lot of times management doesn't see the value. So it can be a hard sell, and you're going to run into people who say, I don't have time to test because I need to get this done. And the easiest way is just grab the value out of the session and I'm done and I'm, at lunch. So
Yeah, it's
I
kind
get
of a
it.
hard sell when you're like, okay, so it's going to take me, 60% of my day to write the unit test, and then the rest would just be to actually write the code.
Right. We need to spend the
just
next
write the
6 months
code.
refactoring before we can even start testing. And then I swear it's going to make us faster. Yeah, good luck getting that one past the bosses.
I mean, the thing is, though, it really does reduce technical debt, though. And that's one thing that none of us will argue here, but it is a really hard sell when you're like, yeah, seriously, it's going to take me half my day to do this, as opposed to just getting the functionality out there.
So I'll agree with you on the technical debt, but you brought up the, oh gosh, how'd you word it a moment ago? Where the stats of how much faster it's going to be or quicker. There's actually been some tests, some studies. Yeah, tests.
Interestingly enough,
Different kind of test. So there's actually been some studies where they've actually taken the time to say like, okay, Group A will write code and they won't write the unit tests, and then Group B will write the unit tests, and like which one actually performs faster. And up front, yeah, the Group B that was writing the tests, especially if they were following TDD, they might have been behind up front while they were just structuring tests and everything and getting a flow down together. And Group A, who was just writing code, looked like they were rocking, right along and going to proceed faster. But then once the second group got their test structured, then they started to progress much faster and with a much higher confidence. And I know we were going to talk about this in the resources we like, but actually some of these tests, these studies I'm referring to, there's actually a reference to it in The Art of Unit Testing. In that book, it references some of that.
and it makes sense because the people that just started hitting the ground running coding, they probably started producing spaghetti code and that kind of stuff, which is much harder to do if you're actually writing unit tests against your methods. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, their code with all their dependencies works fine for right now, and then 3 weeks later, they end up finding that their problems that they're trying to solve then become more difficult because of dependencies that they mistakenly baked in without realizing it. But now they're in a situation where it's like, well, I can't easily undo that, so I'm going to have to live with that. And now I got to bake in all these other, and I got to jump through all these other hoops to try to get around that, and it becomes a nightmare.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
Another reason why it sucks.
Oh, explosion. So the thing with writing testable code is that you're writing these small units that kind of compose together, and it's all very solid. And just like the solid principles, and we talked about quite a bit, it leads to a class/interface/method explosion. You're definitely going to end up with a lot more classes with a lot smaller methods, and that can be a really good thing for composability and good architecture. But it can be a real pain for someone who's not familiar with code or is familiar with the old version of the code that used to have one file with 7 methods and is now looking at 7 files and 3 interfaces.
7 files. Wouldn't that be like, what, 14?
Right.
depends on how solid it is.
43 methods. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but especially it could just be a pain, and a lot of times people kind of struggle also with public versus like internal or private methods and what to test and whatnot, and so it can be a big deal.
Cool.
Yep. And along that line, there are the dependencies. So, yeah, that's really the roughest spot is you've got to cut that stuff out there. If you've got tests that rely on
You find the
session
dependencies
or
so
request,
quick.
especially, and even in the .NET framework, like the HTTP request, there's no interface for that. There's no way to graft on an interface to existing code. We talked about that in episode 1. And so you're going to end up writing wrappers for a lot of stuff. And then not only are you writing these stupid wrappers, but then you're going to your test and you're using sort of mocking or faking library to write fakes for these wrappers that you just wrote. So it's like quadrupling your code.
Well, here's what I was going to say is like one reason why testing can suck is if you're not prepared for it, you might find yourself having to learn dependency injection and mocking. And now you're like, oh crap! All I wanted to do is test my stupid add method.
Yeah.
Right. But if you have, this is where like if you have code that has these dependencies in, then you got to find a way to deal with it, right?
Yeah, and it's gonna hurt.
Or depending on the scenario that you're wanting to test, if you're wanting to test, hey, did this other method get called, or not, right? Then you need a mock for that.
Yep. So one of the questions we've gotten here is basically for knowing if you're doing it right is are you cursing your mocking library? Because it's a pain to mock. It really is. And
Yeah.
I've seen some cool things with like Structure Map and some other libraries, and it's still pain. Even dependency injection, it's still painful. It's annoying. You're going to spend time, goofing around with your mocking library.
Just to try and set up your
Structure
test.
map would be for the dependency injection.
Yeah. But I've seen it with testing a lot for some reason. I don't know why. Also, test coverage kind of sucks, and you're never going to get 100% for anything that's not trivial.
What?
Yeah, it's really
Crazy.
difficult. There's always going to be that one line in there, and like you're even going to think it's tested.
You know what? I hate it because sometimes, depending on what tool you're using, that one line that you're referring to will be the curly brace right after like you
Yep.
throw an exception, and you're like, well, of course that's not going to be called.
Yep.
I just threw an exception.
And there's some nice tools out there, but I've yet to find the code coverage tool that I completely agree with.
Oh, well.
I've written some stupid code in order to please that code coverage tool. Like things I would never normally do, and I know we're going to work, and I make the code uglier just to make sure that I can get
So
closer to
I'm
that.
going to save it. I'm not going to talk about it right now because I got my one that I like.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that in the tip
We'll
of the week.
save it.
I don't want to tease it, but I'm
Yeah.
going to tease it.
And before we get into the resources, one other thing that I saw that somebody said, and I really like, is if you find a bug in your code, you should immediately
Ignore it.
write it.
Oh,
yeah, that too.
sorry.
You should immediately write a unit test before you go and fix it. And then that way, you know that, hey, we've got this covered for the future, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, that
it's-
way you can test the before and the after.
Yep.
Right? Did I actually solve the problem or not?
It's a great. It's just a great little tip that it gets you in the mindset of doing that.
Yep.
So.
And there's always room for
Okay, I
manual
changed my
testing,
mind.
too.
I don't like unit testing anymore. It's too much work.
It's a lot of work. But there are people to help you. There are resources that will help guide you through this process.
Oh, really?
Please tell.
What are some of those?
A favorite of mine is The Art of Unit Testing by @Roy Osherov. Awesome book, and it's short and it's to the point,
So awesome.
and he really knows his stuff.
So there was last year, a year ago yesterday, he released the second edition of that book. And the book has examples in C#, but for all of our listeners who are not C# developers, I can tell you it applies to anything. The concepts in there, he actually talks about other languages too. But the examples are in .NET, specifically in C#. But he does talk about Java and Ruby, and but just conceptually, everything that he's talking about applies to any language out there. Period. It doesn't matter, and it is a fantastic book. So we will definitely have a link to that in the show notes.
Yep. And
So-
also,
Oh, yeah, you want to do it? I'll do it.
I can do it.
No, I want to do it.
I want to do it now.
No,
All right.
I'm going to do it.
You can
Cool,
do it.
because I already hinted on this one.
Yep.
And that is don't use MS Test. So resources we like, I threw in there.
That was not a hint, by the way.
Roy Osherov actually did yell at me on Twitter once for recommending MS Test.
it's
True story.
I mean, it's kind of better than nothing.
I was gonna say, right? Like,
Notice I said kinda, but I mean at least it's there. But really, use NUnit if you're in a .NET environment, or JUnit if you're in Java. Or there are other ones in either environment. I mentioned XUnit before. Whatever you want to use, just really MS Test. It's great that it's free and included in with your version of Visual Studio, but it's going to fall short eventually, and you might not realize that pain until you've gone too far down the path of MS Test. So if you can switch to NUnit, it is recommended.
Yeah, and also wanted to mention earlier we mentioned NUnit being heavily based on JUnit, but also want to mention that JUnit was based heavily on XUnit, which was one of the Smalltalk first testing framework. So I think a lot of the things we talk about, like asserts and whatnot, actually came from there. So just wanted to get that in there before you guys scream at us.
So another resource that we like that I wanted to throw out there was in regards to how to structure your unit test. So I kind of hinted at this earlier in the show, but we're going to include a link to this on hacked.com. This is Phil Hack's site, and he has this great article on how he grew to love structuring his unit tests. And it starts off with the idea being like whatever the method is that you want to test, you create a class, a test method specific for that class, and then for each scenario under test for that method, you create a separate test method for it. So, for example, in my add method that I mentioned before, I might create a class called add tests. And inside of add test class, I might have a method for testing valid integers or testing for null, things like that. I might have different methods for each one of those use cases. But what I like to do though is combine Phil Hack's idea here, or that he documented here in his blog post that we'll link to, with some of the patterns that I cannot pronounce his name, but Roy said in Art of Unit Testing, with how he liked to structure the unit test, because Roy kind of expands on this idea that I think couples very nicely with the concept that Phil Hack had documented, which is that in the naming of your method, Roy suggests that you name it in a pattern of the method under test underscore I wasn't expecting that, so I'm going to start over. The method under test underscore that's going to throw me off every time. The scenario under test underscore you was coming too.
That's what it feels like every time I see an underscore in a method name.
And then the last part is the expected result. So you have 3 parts to your name. So normally you might not use an underscore in your method name, but for these test methods, you name it so that it's method under test underscore scenario underscore expected result. So in the add result, or the add method that I mentioned, I might have the add test class like Phil Hack had suggested, but one of the methods might be named something like add underscore valid integers underscore returns valid integer as the name, right? And then that way you guys are looking at me crazy when I suggest this, but what ends up happening is that no matter what your test runner is now, when you see the report, you have a really good idea right away what was being tested, what was being what the expected result was in the scenario, the method was being under test. So right away you get a lot of information just by looking at the name alone of it. And depending on your test runner, that might be very valuable data for you. And it also is very valuable because when some developer comes behind you 3 months later and wants to modify your tests, he knows exactly what you were trying to test for. He knows the scenario that you were trying to test. So you were trying to test valid integers, and he knows that you were expecting a valid integer to be returned back from the method under test, and he knows what method was supposed to be under test. So just from the name alone, the next developer coming behind you already has a lot of valuable information, right? So going back to Joe's reading the test as documentation point.
Yeah, that definitely sounds nice. Although I gotta say, the programmer that's coming after you is most likely just going to unattach your test project if it starts breaking. Or they're going to comment out the test, they're going to return true, it's going to be green, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, it just get commented out.
This is the world we live in.
That test failed, so I commented out. Now now I can build.
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes me want
The
to
CI server, the CI server passes.
All right, sorry, I stepped out to the real world for a second. I'm coming back to test land now.
I think you're jaded.
Just a little bit. So there are a couple great videos on Pluralsight too.
What?
Yeah, there's a ton on testing in general, but there's 2 particularly I wanted to mention with Scott Allen, who
Not that guy again.
yeah, if you're on Pluralsight, you're familiar with Scott Allen, and also David Starr. So we'll have links to those. They're great.
Cool. And
Yeah,
now
he's
it's
got a
tips.
few of them out there.
Now
Yeah.
it's tips of the week. What you got, Joe?
All right, so first, we're talking about different kinds of testing. There's a podcast I just discovered on the security side of things called the Defensive Security Podcast. And not only do they have the best intro music of any podcast I've ever heard, they're also locals, and it's a great show. So you should check it out if you are into application security and keeping up with those sort of things.
Yeah, Joe's turned me on this one too, and I have really enjoyed it. Although I do say I am looking forward to someone coming out with the Offensive Security Podcast.
Hey, we got time, right?
We can start recording after this, huh? Yeah, it'll be marked with an explicit tag.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in the tips of the week, you kind of hinted at this a moment ago, but when we were talking about coverage, I am a big fan of, oh my gosh, I hate to say that it's another JetBrains product, .cover. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of it. I like it. Your mileage may vary, but it's a great tool for being able to visually see what the code coverage is, and not only can you can, okay, so let me describe this. You can see the code coverage in multiple ways. So in one way, you can see the code coverage from like a bar graph percentage kind of point of view, like, hey, how is my this particular namespace that I'm working in? What percentage of that is covered under these tests that I've been writing? So that's good information. But what's also cool too is it's almost like running a highlighter over your monitor. You can turn on one of the little buttons there. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's almost like a Crayola marker, and it'll actually show you all of the code in green that is under test, and any code that has not been run under a test, it'll be marked in red, so you can visually see the paths that you have written tests against. And I'm a big fan.
Yep, and also it produces an XML file that you can use with other tools like ndepend.
Yeah, you can take that output into ndepend, and then from your static analysis be able to see coverage as well.
Very cool. So my tip of the week is hardware based. I just recently got the Microsoft Sculpt ergonomic keyboard, and
we were talking
one
about
can never
keyboards this time
have
last year.
one can never have too many keyboards. So I have more than a small collection at my house at this point, and this one is by far my favorite so far. It's got a key feel similar to like your MacBook Pro, but
Chiclet.
it's the chiclet keys. They have good travel. I'm not a fan of the function keys, which really stinks as a programmer. But
Funny that you're recommending it.
so here's the deal with the downfalls. It's still so freaking good that it overcomes them. Like it.
Now, you're not a mechanical keyboard fan, right? That's just Joe.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that because I don't really like the clickety clackety
I ain't got
noise.
time for all that.
I don't need something to wake up the neighbors, right?
It's the only exercise I get.
The hammer action on your tips of your fingers.
I got strong fingers.
There's so many bad jokes.
But I'm here to tell you, like, this particular keyboard, after you get used to it, is just absolutely phenomenal. Like, I can type incredibly fast. It's super comfortable. So that's my tip of the week.
So it's not like a Rocket gaming keyboard.
Wait a second. Hey, if we're doing these podcasts once a month, can we really call it a tip of the week?
Whoa. Self-hating podcaster.
All right, so he just unit tested us and we failed.
We did. It's a good thing it's
I
not
was going to
automated.
go back out to the Rocket gaming keyboards again, but no.
Well, maybe we need some show resolutions for the next episode.
Well, have you seen these? I mean, since we're on the keyboards and it is Christmas time, and you might be like in the market for something. Have you seen their Rocket keyboards? They look wicked.
Rocket keyboard?
Yeah, it's ROCCAT.org. You can go out and you can find them. They have various keyboards, but they have like a built-in pad on the front of it. So, like, because picture like your laptop, right? It already has like a pad to rest your palm, and then you start typing away, right?
What's the website?
ROCCAT.org.
It's German.
And no,
Yeah,
You
it
went
says
to
this
the wrong
page
one.
is at ROCCAT.org.
A rock cat.
Yeah, it says this page is in German. Would you like to translate it?
mine doesn't do that.
I'm
You
going
did
to
something weird. You must have clicked on the language at the top.
I did.
At any rate,
I just got
but
to it.
there's like different illuminations that you can get for it too. And if you're into gaming, like you can have different keys illuminate different colors. So it looks wicked. I'm not saying that I would go out and spend, because some of these keyboards that they have are like $170, $180. Like, I mean, you can spend some money on it.
Oh, I've definitely spent more than that over time.
Well, I mean, we were talking about the Adesso, I believe it was. No,
No,
yeah,
not the
the
Kinesis.
Kinesis.
The Kinesis
Yeah,
is 320
Yeah.
or 360, depending on
So
which
that's why I thought
version
you might be like all over this one, but these are mechanical keyboards. So,
and it's not ergo. I don't want any part of this.
Well, no, yeah. Joe would be all over this.
Oh, I will give a tip on this though. So, an additional tip on top of my other one, massdrop.org. Hold on.
That might be important.
No, massdrop.com.
Go to White House.
So no, don't. So massdrop.com, this site is fantastic. So I do a headphone review site as well on top of this, and they typically have things from audiophile to keyboards, which, Joe, they have mechanical keyboards
They
all
have
the
the
time.
code keyboard on
They
sale
do have the
recently.
code keyboard. And so Massdrop, and the way that this site works is it's like they just have certain number of items that if more people buy them, then the price keeps going down. So, give them a check out. I really like the site and I like what they're doing. And if you're into keyboards or audiophile or headphones or anything like that, it's a good place to go.
Yep.
Nice.
So with that, that's the end of the show. So we talked a lot about automated testing and not automated testing and how it encourages good design and fast feedback cycles, but it's very hard. So we hope you learned something.
Yep. And
Well, I think we focus more on just the testing of it, not necessarily the automation of it. Maybe we can do continuous integration separate.
And continuous delivery.
Uh-oh.
hey,
Oh, snap.
yeah, we'll have a whole pipeline of podcasts.
Yeah. So hey, hint, hint. You can look forward to that. So subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher and more using your favorite podcast app, and be sure to give us the reviews like we've said before. We greatly appreciate it. We love to hear the things that you guys say, and love to know that you enjoy it.
Yep. And also contact us with any questions or topics, anything. Leave your name, preferred method of shout out, which nobody does. It could be website, Twitter, whatever.
Now, what if we start getting some random questions? Because you said to contact us with any question.
Then
This is going to get awkward.
we'll write you back like 3 weeks later.
Yeah, I'm down with that, but whatever. And we'll mention you on the podcast. Also, visit us at codingblocks.net where you can find show notes, which we have very good show notes in case you guys haven't actually been there. Examples, discussions, and more.
Yeah, and send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments@codingsblocks.net, and make sure to follow us on Twitter @codingblocks.
And I'm not promising anything, but our show notes might include some time code.
Yep, that's right.
Man, I don't even know why.
So they can skip the boring parts.
There is nothing
Wait,
more. As a
what?
matter of fact, we're going to start mixing
boring part?
important stuff at the very first 30 seconds of the show.
Everything I say is important.
All right, peace out. Hey, by the way, Merry Christmas, everybody, because you know we're not getting another one in before. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. What else is there?
Oh
Kwanzaa?
man, there's a bunch.
Kwanzaa.
Happy
I don't
holidays.
know like all the other ones. That's why everybody just lumps it into Happy Holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.